Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take fascinating research, pull it apart, and give you the insights that, well, really matter.
Yeah, and today we're definitely getting into some heavy territory.
We're looking at the dark side of human nature, and there's this incredible finding that just flips everything on its head. The real puzzle isn't why some people do terrible things.
That's why most of us actually don't.
Exactly. So where are we getting this from today?
Our sources lean heavily on the work of Julia Shaw. She's a criminal psychologist. Her research covers, well, everything from psychopathy and false memory to violent crime and even, more recently, environmental crime.
And her work really challenges our basic ideas about good and evil, right?
Absolutely. It forces you to question those categories.
And the first thing that jumped out at me, honestly, it's pretty provocative. Studies she cites show that murder fantasies, they're incredibly common.
Yeah. The numbers are startling, like 70% of men reporting having them.
70%. And over half of women, too.
Right. Over 50% of women. So it just completely dismantles that notion that, only monsters have these kinds of dark thoughts.
It makes you think these capacities are just part of being human.
That seems to be the implication. They're part of the human psyche. So our mission today really is to unpack this psychology, look at the spectrum of these darker traits.
Okay.
And understand, what pushes someone from just a thought or fantasy into actual action.
And crucially, how unreliable our own minds can be in all of this.
Yeah, that's a huge piece of it.
Okay, so let's start with that big shift in thinking. The idea that evil isn't this black and white thing like a switch. It's more of a continuum.
Exactly. Think of it as a spectrum. And the framework psychologists often use for this is called the Dark Tetrad.
Tetrad, okay, so 4 parts.
4 core traits, yeah. Traits associated with, let's say, darker personalities. And the basic idea is nobody is just purely a monster or purely a saint. We all score somewhere on these 4 scales.
Right, okay. So let's break down those 4 traits. What are they?
Okay, first up is narcissism. That's that sense of being superior, taking maybe excessive pleasure in yourself, feeling you're grander than others.
Got it. Inflated ego. What's next?
A second is Machiavellianism. That's the willingness to do basically whatever it takes to get ahead. Manipulate, deceive, exploit people if it serves your goals.
Okay, so self-serving, manipulative, and the other 2 sound a bit more intense, pushing closer to actual harm.
Yeah, they often are. Third is psychopathy. This is marked by a real lack of empathy, being deceitful, often having a sort of parasitic lifestyle, using people purely for your own gain without remorse.
Okay, lack of empathy is key there.
And the fourth one is sadism, which is probably the most straightforwardly dark, I suppose. It's deriving actual pleasure or enjoyment from hurting other people, physically or psychologically.
Wow. Okay, so those are the 4. But the key insight from the research isn't just listing them. It's that most of us are, what's the term, subclinical.
That's the word, subclinical. And it just means you possess some of these traits, maybe even a bit of all of them, but not at a level high enough to warrant a formal psychological diagnosis.
So it's like everyone has these ingredients, just in different amounts.
Exactly. Think of it like a personality spice rack.
Yeah.
Everyone's got some salt, maybe a bit of narcissism here and there, but only a very few have, like a dangerous level of pure capsaicin, really high psychopathy or sadism.
And when someone scores high across all 4.
That's when they are statistically most likely to actually engage in serious harmful behavior towards others. But again, most people are somewhere in the middle, way below that clinical threshold.
This really brings up that classic nature versus nurture question, doesn't it? And Shaw frames it with that infamous thought experiment.
Yes. Would you kill baby Hitler?
Right, if you could go back in time. How does she suggest we answer that?
Well, her take, based on the psychological research, is that the answer should actually be no.
No.
Because the argument is that people aren't born evil. That extreme capacity for causing harm, it's not predetermined at birth. It develops over time.
Through socialization, environment.
Exactly. Through terrible environments, trauma, societal influences, bad learning experiences. It's nurtured, not just nature. So killing the baby wouldn't necessarily prevent the outcome, because the potential existed, perhaps. But the path wasn't set.
That changes the whole dynamic. It's not about eliminating a monster, but maybe changing the conditions?
Sort of, yeah. Or recognizing that the potential for harm develops. And this leads directly into why Shaw is actually really cautious about using the word evil to describe people.
Why avoid that word? It seems like a natural fit sometimes.
Because, she argues, it stops us thinking. As soon as you label someone evil, you other them.
You put them in a separate box.
Not like us. Precisely. It creates this artificial divide. They're fundamentally different, so we don't need to understand why they did what they did. We just condemn them.
But that act of separation.
That's the dangerous part. That psychological mechanism of creating an us versus them, an other who is evil, is exactly what allows large-scale atrocities to happen in the first place.
Yeah. Because when you look at group conflicts, wars, genocides,
Duh.
both sides nearly always believe they are the ones who are right, the good ones.
Absolutely. And the research highlights two key factors needed for that kind of large-scale harm to occur.
Okay, what are they?
First is dehumanization. You have to reframe the conflict. It's not just a disagreement. It's a battle of pure good versus pure evil. And crucially, both sides usually believe they are the good side, fighting this, moral contamination.
And the second factor?
De-individuation. This is where you lose your sense of individual self and merge with the group identity, that powerful feeling of us versus them.
Like being swept up in a mob?
Kind of. The group provides this massive cloak of justice. It allows individuals to do things together that they would likely never, ever do on their own.
So, if we understand these mechanisms, Shaw makes this case for something called evil empathy. That sounds completely wrong on the surface. Empathy for people who do terrible things.
It does sound counterintuitive, I know. But the goal isn't about forgiving them or excusing their actions. It's purely pragmatic. It's about safety.
How so?
Well, if you actually want to stop harmful behavior from happening again, you have to understand the psychological and social levers that led to it. You can't prevent a cycle if you refuse to understand how it works.
So empathy here is a tool for understanding, for prevention, not agreement.
Exactly. It's a tool for systemic prevention and maybe de-escalation, not emotional endorsement. It's about figuring out the how and why to make society safer.
Okay, let's shift from the theory to the concrete. What happens when you actually interview people convicted of serious crimes? What does their own story, their narrative, reveal?
It's fascinating, actually. The mind goes to incredible lengths to maintain a positive self-image, even after doing something terrible.
So they don't see themselves as evil.
Rarely. Their narrative is often very controlled, very rationalized. They tend to minimize their own role in what happened. They normalize the behavior. Anyone would have done it in my shoes, or everybody does stuff like this.
Downplaying the harm.
Definitely. Diminishing the impact on the victims. All this elaborate psychological defense work, basically, aimed at preserving the belief that deep down, I'm still a good person.
So the biggest lie isn't necessarily to the investigators. It's to themselves.
Often, yes. And society has its own flawed narratives, especially around really serious crimes like murder, the media portrayal versus the reality.
Right. We expect these elaborate mastermind plots. True crime loves that narrative. What's the actual data say?
The reality is usually much, messier and less planned. First off, recidivism for homicide. It's incredibly low, only about 1–3%. People who kill once generally don't kill again.
1 to 3%. That's really low.
It is. And most murders aren't these meticulously planned events. They're often awful, impulsive decisions made in the heat of an argument. Overreaction.
Over what?
Often incredibly trivial things. When you look at the reports, arguments over, $4, a stolen bike, something petty that spirals tragically out of control.
But we want there to be a big reason, don't we? An extreme act needs an extreme motive in our minds.
We do. We crave that narrative coherence, and that desire for certainty also messes with our perception of people in general.
Yeah.
Like who we decide is creepy.
Yeah, the creepiness radar. How reliable is that, according to the research?
Not very reliable at all, actually.
Yeah.
It's highly flawed. It often misfires simply when someone deviates from social norms.
How so?
Someone who maybe holds eye contact a bit too long or not long enough, or perhaps people dealing with severe mental illness whose behavior might seem erratic but isn't necessarily threatening.
And we react badly.
Studies show we tend to create distance, both physically and psychologically, from behavior we label as weird. We mistake social awkwardness or nonconformity for actual danger.
And speaking of flawed detectors, what about lie detection? Are we any good at spotting lies?
No. Shockingly bad, actually.
Really? Even professionals? Police?
Even them. Most people, including police investigators, trained in specific interview techniques, perform no better than chance, like flipping a coin.
Wow. But they think they're good at it.
That's the real danger. The confidence is often incredibly high. They believe they can tell.
And that overconfidence.
That's where the huge problems come in. It can lead to tunnel vision in investigations, focusing on the wrong person, potentially leading to wrongful convictions.
And in personal life, too, I imagine.
Absolutely. Think about jealousy in relationships. It's often driven by insecurity combined with this flawed, overconfident belief that you know your partner is lying, even when the evidence might not support it at all.
Okay, this is getting concerning. If our perception of others is flawed and our lie detection is basically useless,
Yeah.
what about the bedrock? Our own memory, how reliable is that?
Well, this is where Shaw's research gets particularly unsettling. Her work, and a lot of memory science now, suggests that every single autobiographical memory you have, it's false, at least to some degree.
Every memory. False. That sounds broken.
But here's the twist. The research suggests it's not a glitch. It's actually a feature of a normal, healthy brain.
A feature. How is having a faulty memory a good thing?
Because the brain isn't designed to be a perfect video recorder. It's designed for efficiency, for creativity, for problem solving. It prioritizes the gist memory.
The gist, like the main point.
Exactly. The main takeaway, the emotional core, the lesson learned, the solution to the problem the event represented. Your brain doesn't waste precious resources storing every single verbatim detail because most details aren't useful for future survival or decisions.
So it's like an editor, constantly tweaking the story.
That's a great way to put it. It's a narrative editor, optimizing the data, creatively stitching things together, which is why the specific details are often where memory fails under scrutiny.
And Shaw's own research on creating false memories, that was pretty stunning. Right?
Yeah, terrifyingly effective, yeah. Using suggestive interviewing techniques, structured, non-confrontational, her team managed to convince 70% of participants they'd committed a serious crime years earlier.
70% believed a fabricated crime.
Believed it, and even started providing vivid, plausible details about it. Things like assaulting someone with a weapon when they were 14, things that absolutely never happened.
How is that even possible? Are these just tweaks to real memories?
Sometimes they can be modifications of real events, blending fact and fiction, but other times they can be entirely fabricated, complex narratives. We can even unconsciously steal vivid details from someone else's story and incorporate them into our own memory, like being a memory thief without realizing it.
Okay, this feels particularly relevant right now with AI becoming so advanced.
Absolutely. Shaw specifically flags this. Generative AI, especially if it's designed to be conversational, like a chatbot partner, it's potentially the ultimate false memory machine.
How so?
Because we know that short, social, suggestive interactions are enough to plant these seeds of memory distortion. Imagine AI doing that at scale. She raises concerns that governments could potentially use this for mass gaslighting, subtly shifting collective memory through seemingly innocent interactions.
That's a chilling thought. So what's our defense? How do we protect ourselves against our own minds being so easily manipulated?
The best defense is surprisingly low tech. It's contemporaneous evidence.
You mean?
Meaning you have to operate under the assumption that you will forget or misremember things no matter how important or vivid they feel right now. The key is to get the details out of your brain and document it externally.
Like writing it down, recording it.
Yes.
Yeah.
As close to the time of the event as possible. Write it down, record a voice memo, take a picture, create an external record. Don't trust your future memory, trust the record you made at the time.
Okay, that's practical advice. This focus on honesty and self-awareness kind of leads us into another area the source material explores, one that's often surrounded by, well, shame and taboo, sexuality, kinks specifically.
Right. Things like BDSM, which is actually a very common fantasy, often get wrongly stigmatized. People associated with some kind of, defective character, maybe linking it back subconsciously to those dark tetrad traits like sadism.
But the psychology is different.
Often, yes. The appeal frequently stems from something called the disinhibition hypothesis.
Disinhibition, letting go.
Exactly. It's the profound freedom that comes from letting go of constant social pressure, the burden of responsibility, the sheer exhaustion of making endless decisions every day.
So in a fantasy or a consensual BDSM scene,
You can just be present. There's often this interesting juxtaposition. The highly structured, controlled nature of the interaction provides a stark contrast to the chaos of normal life. And that contrast can offer a really powerful psychological and emotional release.
the research also touches on relationship structures, particularly the pressures around monogamy.
Yeah, it suggests that monogamy, while it's our dominant cultural model, might be a social construct that, statistically speaking, sets many people up to fail.
Because of cheating rates.
The consistently high rates of infidelity suggest that forcing everyone into a one-size-fits-all model for complex human sexuality often leads to dishonesty, guilt, and conflict rather than fulfillment.
And jealousy comes up here too, as a red flag.
Significant one. Shaw's perspective, reflecting much psychological literature, is that intense jealousy is often rooted less in love and more in insecurity, possessiveness, and a desire for control.
Not just protective caring.
It can easily cross that line. It's often viewed as a major precursor to intimate partner violence, a real warning sign that the relationship dynamics might be unhealthy, maybe built more on fear than on mutual trust and respect.
So the alternative path suggested is embracing more diversity in relationships.
Recognizing that beautiful spectrum of human experience, as Shaw puts it, allowing for structures like ethical non-monogamy, open relationships, or polyamory, where the foundation is open communication and honesty rather than societal expectation or fear.
Moving beyond rigid definitions to find what actually works for people.
Right, finding structures that genuinely accommodate human emotional and sexual diversity without shame.
Okay, let's pivot one last time. Shaw is applying this criminal psychology lens to a totally different area now. Environmental crime, green crime.
Yeah, this is a really fascinating new direction for taking the tools used to understand, say, murderers or fraudsters, and applying them to people harming the planet, illegal loggers, poachers, but also, crucially, corporate executives.
Like in corporate fraud cases, the Volkswagen Dieselgate scandal comes to mind.
That's a perfect example. The core question becomes, what leads seemingly intelligent, successful people, engineers and managers, executives, to commit massive crimes like systematically lying about deadly pollution?
In the VW case, they designed software specifically to cheat emissions tests, sometimes hiding pollution levels that were, 40 times the legal limit? How does that happen psychologically on a corporate scale?
It's rarely just one evil individual making a decision in isolation. It's highly social. It taps into those group dynamics we talked about, conformity, rationalization.
How does the rationalization work there?
Individuals might tell themselves, look, if our company doesn't cut corners on emissions, we won't be competitive. The company might fail, thousands of jobs lost. They diminish the environmental harm. It's just regulations. The impact is spread out. And they find safety in numbers, in conformity.
Knowing others are doing it too.
Exactly. Knowing their peers, maybe even competitors, are likely also bending the rules to succeed in the market. It becomes a sort of distributed crime, a diffusion of responsibility across the whole organization.
It sounds like Machiavellianism, but spread across a system.
That's a good way to think about it. Moral injury and responsibility get diffused. The challenge with green crime is this multi-level complexity decisions in a boardroom in Germany, impacting deforestation in the Amazon, for instance.
It can feel overwhelming, like slipping into eco-anxiety. Does the research offer any hope?
It does, actually. Shaw emphasizes that while these crimes are complex, there are dedicated people fighting them. There are specific environmental laws, specialized enforcement agencies, groups like Interpol running undercover operations.
So it's not hopeless.
Not at all. The point of studying it isn't just to highlight the problem, but to show it's being understood, analyzed, and actively countered. The goal is to move people from anxiety to feeling motivated, energized, and purposeful, knowing that action is possible and happening.
Okay, so let's bring it all together, from the Dark Tetrad to our faulty memories to corporate crime. What's the big synthesis here, the main takeaway for someone listening?
I think the biggest takeaway is that genuine safety, and maybe even genuine morality, requires some uncomfortable self-reflection. We need to move past the easy myth of the monster out there.
And recognize the spectrum within.
Recognize that the capacity for harm exists on a spectrum, often driven by context, by social forces, by situations, rather than just inherent evil. And crucially, we have to accept the immense power, but also the profound unreliability of our own minds.
Our flawed perceptions, our overconfidence, those fragile memories.
Exactly. Understanding why we usually choose not to do terrible things, understanding those restraints and motivations, is maybe the most critical step toward building a genuinely safer, more empathetic society.
That's a really powerful thought to end on, but maybe one final actionable idea. You mentioned Shaw talks about the heroic imagination. How can we use all this dark knowledge for good?
Right, the heroic imagination. It's basically a framework for proactive moral action. The idea is to, in a sense, rehearse evil in your mind.
Rehearse evil, that sounds wrong.
Not because you want to do it, but so you can visualize resisting it. For example, mentally rehearse that moment where you feel pressured to conform to something unethical at work. Or visualize yourself witnessing an emergency. Feel the bystander effect kicking in that urge to do nothing, and then mentally practice overriding it.
So you recognize the pathway to inaction or harm.
Yes. By mentally rehearsing, you train your mind to recognize those subtle psychological pressures when they happen for real. You spot the pathway towards conformity or deception or inaction.
And it buys you time.
It buys you that critical moment to pause, recognize the trap, and consciously choose a different path, the path of intervention, of speaking up, of helping. It turns understanding our dark potential into training for everyday heroism.